Welcome to Chronic Curiosity, where we have real conversations with real people, from everything to anything, in attempts to facilitate dialogue with our fellow humans, and hopefully your curiosity as well as ours. If you can withstand the show, we ask, most importantly, that you tell your friends and family, but also you can pick up some merch or just donate to the show at chronic-curiosity.com in USD or Bitcoin. If you feel so obliged, you can give us a good rating and follow on whatever podcast platform you so choose. But please feel free to reach out to us on the website or the socials, which can also be found on the website, chronic-curiosity.com. And here we go. He's like, I come prepared.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's not that kind of show. I mean, I guess it could be. It could be. Get the right lighting, you know. You got to have good lighting for that, for sure. No?
Yeah, no. Lighting makes all the difference.
Production quality. Yeah, and you can, anytime you can grab this thing and move it around. You're not going to break it or anything. You're good.
All right.
It's still kind of... So I can't imagine, like you said, coming from San Diego to south of Shreve.
Wait, hold on a second. Everyone, this is Mr.
I'm still
Paul
trying
Moss.
I'm still trying to process that in my mind.
We should probably introduce him.
Oh yeah, I wasn't. I don't know if we were starting. Yeah, but Paul Moss, I appreciate you hanging out with us. So I essentially know nothing about you.
Okay,
but you just told me your very quick backstory of where you grew up and how you got here, and maybe we could just start with that. If you want to give us a little background of, I guess, fill in the blanks of the surprising checkpoints that you've been on to get here.
Actually, where were you born?
I was born in Salem, Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah, I was born. Yeah. So.
Okay.
I don't know. It's kind of a interesting, very circuitous question. I don't know where. Like, do you want to start with the grit, and then because there's some shit.
I mean, so you were born in Salem, Oregon.
Yeah.
Where's that at?
So Salem, Oregon is about 45 miles south of Portland.
Okay.
So basically, basically it's even though it's the capital, it's a smaller city. But I was born to a 14-year-old drug addict, and so anything that you think would ensue from that absolutely did.
Wow.
And effectively, I mean, she was 14, right? Like you can't blame her. But she made the mistake of fighting for me. But she couldn't handle it. I mean, obviously she was 14. She wanted to party. She wanted to be a kid, right? And rightfully so. She wanted to do drugs, and effectively, I moved every couple weeks because the judge was intervening and trying to facilitate her. And so we'd move from family member to family member to friend to friend to friend. And effectively none of that worked. And after, a series of moves, probably about 20 in my first 2 years, the judge finally said enough. Put me in the foster system. There I moved a couple more times, and then I finally settled in with the Davies, who are really, really good people. And I was with them for a little bit, and at this point in time, so basically, if you were to take the first 3 years, you take the moves, and then this is where really the physical stuff happened. Getting cigarettes burn out on my arms, at the parties, getting thrown across the fire pits. I was like the dog at a high school party, basically. except for I was a kid. And then finally, I went to some foster homes, some bad ones, and then the Davies were a good one. But unfortunately, my mom conjured a plan to try to keep me. And so she arranged to have me kidnapped. So I was taken by her friends from Oregon to Colorado, and nobody wanted to be associated with the kidnapping, right? And so they dropped me off in an apartment and they left some food, but I'm 3.5. And so the plan was somebody would check on me every 10 days. And I was 3.5. I didn't know how to ration food, right? So just like a dog, right? If you go on vacation and you didn't put your dog in a whatever pound or whatever kennel, yeah, that's it. Right. So I didn't ration my food. So then every 10 days when somebody would check on me, I was malnourished, barely alive. And this happened for about a year. They didn't have electronics and the communications that they have now, right? I mean, that would never fly here, or in this day and age, but back then it did. So there was that. The thing that really stuck with me though, and the thing that's come back is, and as we go into the ceremonies or ayahuasca ceremonies and things of that nature here in a little bit. That was really where I started creating, that's really where I started creating my resiliency. And that's where I started creating a lot of things at 3.5 to 4.5 that would carry with me literally until a couple of years ago. And candidly, a lot of them, when I was on iboga last week, that 3.5-year-old was fighting for me. And I was trying to tell my 3.5-year-old self to let it go. Like, I mean, that's how intense that was. Because you think about it, like you're in a place, there's nothing. It's a barren apartment. There's nothing. There's no toys. There's no TV. So I was literally alone with myself for 10 days at a time, right? On top of the eating. And so I'd do things like I'd create games, right? So, the little door stoppers that go doing, right? Like I would like flip those and like try to count how many, and I try to get like, I try to beat like, like how many seconds I could get it to doing. I would like put my fingers in between the door cracks and I would like flip the door. And then my goal was to get my hand out of the door before it pinched my fingers. Right. And how close could I come? But one thing in particular that really stood out that really has defined a lot of what I think was my resiliency, and also my inability to have to carry a lot of like emotional intelligence personally, was I created there were phone books back in the day. I'm sure people remember those, right?
You gotta be at least probably what,
so
25 to 30 probably 30 to remember a phone book at least.
Yeah, absolutely. So like that was my toy. So what I used to do is I used to rip the pages out of the phone book and I would crinkle up the pages and I would make animals and I would teach school all day. And that was my primary source of entertainment. And I realized in my first ayahuasca ceremony what I was teaching them. And we can go into that when we go more into the ceremonies in a bit. So finally, 4.5, the police busted in, right? Guns up. And I was just crying, right? I was sobbing. There was this, I remember it was a blonde curly hair police woman. And I was sitting in her lap in the front seat of a police car, which I actually thought was cool, even though I was crying. And the lights were going and they were getting me to the hospital or the police station. I actually was the police station. And I was crying. I was sobbing. I was like, what's going on? And then we got to the station and I saw a vending machine. I just stopped. I stopped. I just looked at it and opened my eyes and I just couldn't believe all the food that was there. And then I went to a interstitial house, and then eventually ended up back with the Davies, which was pretty cool. But even back then, the reason I say my mom really really fucked me over by trying to hold on is because people like to adopt when a kid is young, right? So once you get past that 1 year, 2 years, like that's really where, the pool thins out. And unfortunately, um, that's where, at that point, they're desperate to match you. And so I got just matched with people who should not have ever been able to adopt a kid. And that's where I think the real trauma started to kick in, actually. But even when I was in the foster home, I always remember wanting the other kids. Like I was cool with my circumstances. I was okay. Like I wanted other kids to get adopted first. And there were these twins, Danny and Domingo, or they were brothers. And like, I wanted everything. I was doing everything I could to get them adopted together. And it was really cool. They got adopted by a family with a helicopter. And I thought that was like the coolest thing ever, right? They got to leave foster care in a helicopter in the backfield. I mean, how fucking cool is that, right?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in my little like St. Patrick's Day hat, like a bozo, but anyway, each one has their story. So effectively my new parents, so at this point I went from Jesus Angel de Martinez, that was my birth name, to now I went to Paul Moss, who you guys are talking to right now. And effectively they tried to adopt a few times, and my mom was a special ed teacher. They were trying to adopt one of her students, and that fell through. They tried to do something else, and then it was me. And my mom she told me when I was 12, she couldn't handle that I wasn't from her womb. And like, as a 12-year-old boy, like, first of all, you don't know what the fuck that means, but also like that is also like, okay, then why did you even, put me through this? But she could never handle it. Right. And I wasn't that kid. She did things like, if she was a special ed teacher, she tried to put me in special ed. If you can imagine like my social, my social disabilities, like I didn't have any, I mean, I was isolated for a year, right? I didn't go to conventional school. I didn't have the normal, I didn't have the normal conventions. I didn't know the alphabet. I didn't know how, none of the kindergarten stuff or kinder or preschool stuff. So she was trying to put me in special ed. So that was a real great thing for, ego, like trying to battle that while my brothers and sisters were getting in the talented and gifted programs. And it's one of those things, like every time her car pulled in the driveway, my heart dropped and I hid. And I just my goal was to have as many minutes between when she found me and when she got home as humanly possible. And then just try to avoid as much as possible. So that was phase one of being adopted. And it's one of those things, and I'm not alone in this. School is quasi your comfort zone because you don't have people like going to attack you. You have other kids like bullying and stuff, but like you don't care as much about the other kids doing it because like the people that you want to love you are your parents, right? Like right. They're the ones who you want to care. And so like the bullying and stuff, like that's just that, that becomes the norm. That becomes the norm. And so just, being afraid, every moment in your house, and just like, the bullshit, like that's when I needed somebody to deliver, right? Like I just needed, like after 5 years of what I went through, I needed somebody to truly like deliver. And then my sister and I were pretty close. And we, at this point, we were praying for divorce. We literally, because it was such a toxic household. Like everything was ugly, but to put it into perspective, like if you were talking about the Cinderella story, like I had like 30 chores and my sisters had one each. Like, empty the silverware basket was one of them. And like, feather dust, like the dining room table was the other ones. Like, and mine was mow the lawn, weed, like, clean the rocks, move the wood pile, chop the wood. Like, it was, all that stuff, which I hated at the time, but also created work ethic. And I didn't know that, right? So actually, in hindsight, so to tell you, collectively, I have 13 brothers and sisters between the two situations, and not one of them has a conventional job. And then I know that you don't know much about me, but I started a company and I've had a lot of success in my career. So it's just such a polar, it's there's such polarity in what happened. And then at 13, my parents finally got divorced, 12 or 13. I had my moment where the judge, and I don't know why the judge did this, but the judge told me to live with my grandparents for 2 months during the summer while they sorted through things, which was amazing because I saw quasi what normal was. And I actually went from that summer was between my 8th and 9th grade year. And I went from being like a 1.8 student to being a 3.8 student, right? Like on the flip side of that year.
So which grandparents?
My dad's parents.
So, because it seems like there's a more contentious relationship there with the mom versus the dad.
So there was until the divorce. And then that's when I think the worst of the worst for me and happened. Because what happened is this. So you have to understand, I'm scared. Every minute of every day I'm scared. My dad got me in trouble when I was 8 or 9 years old. I want to tell you, there's 2 stories that just exemplify how scared I was. My dad got me in trouble and he told me to sit on a bench, right, in our house. And he said, don't move. And I didn't. And he walked by 14 hours later and saw me sitting on the bench. And he's like, what are you still doing on the bench? I'm like, I was too scared to even answer. He's like, oh my gosh, have you been here for 14 hours? Like, what, since I told you? And I was like, yeah. And I hadn't moved. I literally hadn't moved. There was another time, my dad told me that I had this little cut on my throat and I saw the scar from it. My dad said, if you don't stop the bleeding, you're going to die. So I literally put my finger on that hole, right? And it was just a scratch. I literally put it on that for as long as I could until I fell asleep. And it actually it didn't even go from a cut to a scab. It just went straight to a scar by how long I hold it. And so to help you get into the mentality or the fear that I was in, I wasn't disobeying, right? So effectively, I was scared too. So effectively, when my dad used to take stuff out on my mom, right? But when they got divorced, and I think the repercussions I didn't realize is my sister went to live with my mom, right? So I lost my best friend. And then all the stuff that my dad used to take out on my mom all fell to me now. And that's where the juxtaposition of this was my last chance at having a parent. And I was holding on and I held on to that until I was 33. And just trying desperately to ever get any approval. I learned what the term narcissist meant at 42. And when I was 42 years old, I didn't understand what it was. But then as I learn about it, I realize all the things that it is. There was one night I did everything to protect my brother. He was 7 years younger than me, and he and I got pretty close for a bit. There was one night where my brother and I were downstairs, and my brother and I are both physically at this point, we probably could have kicked my dad's ass. My dad wasn't small. He was 6'1", probably 250, 270. So he wasn't small, but he was just Go-Gurt, like a tube of Go-Gurt, right? He had no muscle tone, whatsoever, right? So, and my brother and I were, in sports and pretty athletic, but we were so scared that we agreed if he took one step downstairs and towards the basement, that we were going to jump out the window, and we made 2 paths that we were going to run. We were going to separate so he couldn't get both of us. He couldn't shoot both of us. and then we were going to meet at another house, like, you know, like 2 miles away, and like, you know, creating these plans and manufacturing these plans. And I'm just telling those to just because it's hard to describe until you cite those examples about what the mindset was, right? So anyway, so when I lived with my grandparents, I became determined to prove the world wrong. That was my goal, to prove to everybody that I was actually worth something. And things really changed for me. From an outside perspective. So I started playing football and I was really good at it. I weighed nothing. I was like 4'9". I weighed like a buck maybe. I didn't turn 5 foot until I was like 15 years old. But I could throw the football 65 yards. And like I was good. And I got, like I said, I got 3.8 GPA. And there was this one kid, Justin Whiteman, who for some random this is like divine intervention, but he was the most popular kid in school, right? He ended up going to Dartmouth on a football scholarship. He was like the nicest guy and also the most popular, which doesn't usually happen. And for some reason he befriended me. And like he included me in everything, right? And so all of a sudden, like all the cool kids are like actually paying attention to me. And so one example is I went from being a complete like social derelict to being from a complete social derelict to like being in like the prom group, like the group, right, of 9 people. Like I went with the people, right? I was like, wow, this is amazing. Even though it was horrible. I told a worse joke, like on my toast. Like I didn't know, I didn't belong there, but I was there. And like the year before I was Spanish Club president, I know that doesn't sound very cool, right? So, but I was trying to like amp up my resume like crazy for college, right? So I was doing everything. I was like biology club, if you name it, I did it. So the year before I was Spanish Club president, there were 6 members. And when I was Spanish Club president, there were like 260 members. So like if you look at in the yearbooks from one year to the next, it's hilarious, right? It's like 6 dweebs, right? 1 year. And then the next year they needed like a helicopter view to take the picture. So anyway, so I ended up getting a full ride to college for academics, and I ended up getting half rides for football because I was just small. And so I took the full ride for academics, and my dad dropped me off, and he goes, the only reason people liked you is because you were decent at football. So he's like, now that you're in college and not playing, like you're back to being a loser, right? Those were his parting words. And somehow through all the orientations, somehow I didn't talk to anybody. Like somehow it's impossible through freshman orientations to not talk to somebody. And I remember going outside and just crying and just being like, I'm just going to focus on school. You know, I'm not going to have friends. I'm here to learn. I'm here to get an education. And 7 weeks later, it was parent teacher, whatever. I don't know what that is. Parent weekend, right? And like we went to church, right? Like he showed up for parent weekend, like the same reason that we went to church on Sunday, because it looked good, not because there was like, you know, anything there. And there's a couple moments in my life where I do think that there's some kind of divine intervention. Although I'm not a religious zealot. And this was one. Well, my dad was in my dorm room for a total of like 5 minutes, and while he was there, this girl knocked on the door, and she handed me this letter, and it said I got nominated to the homecoming court. And I just thought that was the poetic justice after like 7 weeks earlier, him saying like, no one's going to like you. Right. And so, you know, I got a 3.0, I think. It was around there, but I didn't care. I didn't try. I was just I partied. I was a social maniac. All the years of repression. I let out. I let the lid off that. And I had a blast, but I still maintained a reasonable GPA. But I hated what I was doing. I like absolutely hated. I was in pre-medicine on a full ride, and I hated science. So like not a good,
not a good combination there.
No, not at all.
a horrible combination, right? So I was driving to get beer for the Joey Tata party, and for those who don't know, Joey was Nat on the owner of the Peach Pit on Beverly Hills 90210. And so and I was driving a car, and I looked left, I looked right, I looked left again, and there was no car when I looked left the first time. The next time I looked left, there was a car just barreling at me. And so it was either the normal reaction would have been brakes. I put on the gas. And if I hadn't put on the gas, I would have got hit square. This guy ended up flipping over my car. He ended up with like his head pinned. He ended up with his head pinned up on the curb, bleeding profusely. He had a Jeep, so there was no top on his car. I was like in this like Hyundai before Hyundais were anything, right? I don't know if people remember what Hyundais were, but Hyundais originally were like Kias 15 years ago.
I was like when they were selling Kias, buy one, get one.
Yeah. So I spun a time and a half in my Kia, and it was a nothing. It was this little tiny hatchback. And I spent a time and a half, and I moved a Park 77 Buick like 5 feet back. And those things were trucks, right? If you guys remember. And this woman was right behind me, was like, hey, if you weren't here, I was in a rush and I was speeding. And then she pointed to the backseat of her car where we got hit, and then there was a new baby. And she's like, thank you for taking that accident for me. And but it shook me, and I realized I wasn't living life the way that I wanted to. And I bailed out of I dropped my full ride, and I can't remember what I think I just started waiting tables. No, not waiting tables. I wasn't qualified to wait tables. I was a hostess. At Red Robin. That's what I was. $7 an hour. And I would seat people with all the vigor and, that I could. And I was a great person sitter. And they thought I did that so well that they promoted me to bus boy, and I bussed like a champion. And then I got promoted to waiter, and I supplemented my income because the bank had this thing where if you have to wait more than 10 minutes in line for anything, then you got like $10. And so every day I'd go at lunch when they were the most busy, and I got an extra $10 every day.
$10 an hour,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. So it was
it's like time and a half.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So I was my roommate, who was a Gap model. So I was the brunette guy, and he was like the blonde blue eye guy, right? And even though I wasn't near as attractive as him, just the polar difference, like, some people prefer brunettes, and everybody like thought he was attractive. He and I were roommates, and we were walking down the road, and a Navy recruiter came up, and he's like, hey, you guys thought about the Navy? And like I was like, fuck no. And then my roommate was like, well, I've thought about it, and he gave our number, right? By the way, that was our number because we didn't have cell phones, right? So we had like one central. I did have like a 933 gigahertz phone that I used to take around like in my neighborhoods, so that the ladies would think I was cool. And for those who don't know, it was a brick. Literally, I was walking around with a brick.
How'd that work out for you?
He's like moving along.
Let's just say,
it was fine.
Yeah, the boys did all right. So he starts talking to this guy, and I was like, what is he doing? Right. So this is when like Don't Ask, Don't Tell was coming out. And so like I put my arms around him. I'm like, please don't leave me. Right. Cause I thought like, like the guy would be like, oh wait, we can't, and so this recruiter called every day, And one morning, I was the night before we were partying, and I was on the 4th floor, and I was peeing off the roof, but half of my feet were on the roof and half of my feet were off the roof, and I'm literally swaying while I'm peeing drunk. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing right now? Like, I'm literally throwing away my life. And so the next morning, when this recruiter called and I like went down, took the test, and I got a 98 on my ASVAB, which is like 1 point shy of perfect, and which meant I got any job that I wanted, and it also would pay for college on the flip side, right? So I joined the Navy, and I just remember, like, I've never thrown, by the way, on my bucket list is to get in a fight. Okay, it is on my bucket list. I want to get in a fight. I've never thrown a punch in my entire life. I'm not a violent person. Like, even when I've been drunk, I mean, I've just never done it. It's just not how I'm wired. But when I went to the military, like the night before I got sent out to boot camp, like this guy that I was bunked up with, like there was a duck on the TV, and he's like, boo, 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 boo. I was like, oh shit. What did I just get myself into?
You just found yourself a hunter.
I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, these next 4 years are gonna suck. Fortunately, it was nothing like that. The next 4 years were really good for me. Got me some organization, got me some discipline, allowed me to drink like a idiot, and then hyperachieve. By the way, like there are really, really intelligent people in enlisted military. Like there are a lot of people who are just lost or don't have their like path forward. But I will say, like most of the, and this is probably not going to be a popular statement, but it is through observation. Everyone says like thank you for your service or things like that, because I'm a veteran. But the reality was myself and most people were just lost. Like yes, you're serving your country, and yes, there's this sense of patriotism, but I was just lost, and it was an outlet that provided some sort of like structure for me to be lost in. And there are so many people that are like that, but I am telling you, the enlisted ranks are filled with like hyper intelligent people. And you build a camaraderie, and you do some really cool things. Saw some really cool countries. Saw some really cool things. I was fortunate because of my ASVAB score. It begat a lot of really cool opportunities. So like I got to like work with, I commissioned ships, right? So I got to work work with like Colin Powell. I got to work with like Condoleezza Rice, Bush. I got to I got to work with the Secret Service. I got to set up a speech for George H.W. and Barbara, which was super cool, learning about like all the like rules and restrictions, like how they keep the president safe. John Saakashvili was the Joint Chief of Staff, right? Like really effectively the highest military position other than President of the United States in the entire world. His granddaughter fancied me. She loved me. So like I got to hang out, and it was during commissioning week. His wife was from Portland, Oregon. We were commissioning there. I was from Portland, Oregon. So they connected us, and I got to hang out for a week with the Joint Chief of Staff, right? I mean, insights, stuff you can't even imagine. Like such a cool life. Like I said, I hyper performed. I did 2 things in the military that nobody's ever done before. Hyper performed, and then I got out. After 4 years. They tried to keep me in. And here's the thing about getting out of the military, and this is very real. And Tony, I think you have some experience with what you do in Worcester with some of this stuff. Like I knew by sound how to tell, which Russian submarine was coming at us, how fast it was coming at us, which one it was, what its nuclear capabilities are, right? What its missile right? And I'm sitting there getting out of the military, and I'm like applying at like Red Lobster, and they're like, "Yeah, but that's cool. But can you wash dishes?" I'm like, "Oh, good point." Like, yeah. So I became a dishwasher for Red Lobster. Um, which, by the way, just so everybody knows, the dishwasher is the one that makes those biscuits too. So, like, if you like,
oh, dude, don't do that to people.
I'm sorry.
Don't do that.
I have to. It's.
I've made salads at Olive Garden, so I.
Yeah,
I get it. I get it. I also wash dishes.
Yeah. It's the modus operandi. So in the Navy, you can't call off, right? So like all of a sudden, like I've got a conventional job. I haven't had one for 4 years. And by the way, one thing I didn't talk about, I worked since 3rd grade. So I babysat, I mowed lawns, I picked strawberries, I worked at a pizza place, worked at a grocery store. Like I worked my entire life up until then. And getting out of the Navy, I actually had freedom. So of the 5 days I was washing dishes, they told me, or I got to call off, right? And I wasn't familiar with this concept, right? So I called off 3 of the 5 days at Red Lobster. Now, I'm single, and I reek of fish. Okay, this is not good for my game, right? So I'm like, this doesn't fly, right? So I quit Red Lobster, and they're like, "What are you're quitting on us?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I called off like 3 of the 5 days, right?" And they're like, "We were going to promote you." Like, I mean, if it just, and I think that, and the reason I tell that story because it exemplifies how much harder than everybody else I did work when I was there. Like my work ethic is beyond, was beyond. I worked as hard as I partied, but I worked. And I took another job. I took a night inventory person. Oh my God.
That sounds terrible.
Hardest job I think I've ever had, honestly, if I'm being for real. Do you know who dominates nighttime inventory? 70-year-old women. These people's fingers are so dexterous. I mean, they're like flying through. I'm like doing like 2 CDs to their like 20.
Well, they've been knitting all those years. The crocheting.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's got to be the crocheting.
It's muscle memory.
I have been a shining star everywhere I've worked, except for night inventory, and I got
what were you
slaughtered.
inventorying?
Anything, CDs, cans of beans. Like it didn't. Like you just go from store to store, right? Greeting card. It doesn't matter. But man, they oh man, Betsy, Myrtle, Ethel, they crushed, right? So I realized like nighttime inventory isn't for me.
So much sick.
So I was like, yeah, not my proudest moment. So I took this job clearing the area around telephone poles in San Diego. And this was a really cool job. It was very physical labor. It was cool. Like one time there was like this buffalo field, okay? And half the pole clearing was on the non-buffalo fenced in side. Oh. The other half of the clearing was on the buffalo side, right? So I weed whacked like a mofo, like the half that was not in the buffaloes, right? So, and I'm like, you know, this I don't need to do this, right? Because it's like it's a fence, and then it's like 3 strands of barbed wire, right, on that are like tilted. So the next morning I get to work, and the guy was like, my boss was like, "Hey, you know that you did a pull by the buffalo field yesterday, right?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Hey, how did you get into the buffalo? Like the buffalo?" I was like, "Oh." I was like, "Oh yeah, I did it." I was like, "Shit." So I'm training that day, right? I'm like, "Okay, I gotta hop this fence, right? You're on duty, right? You gotta watch for these buffaloes, right? These 1,700-pound buffaloes with horns." And I throw my weed whacker over, right? And I jump in, and I'm like, it's such an idiot. I'm like wearing a red shirt, right? So like even like to compound it, right? Because I'm thinking of like the running of the bulls at this point. So like I'm sitting there, and they start to stampede up on this like, so there's like 10 feet of like rise, and then they're starting to stampede, and I'm freaking out. I'm trying to weed whack as fast as fucking possible. So I get done weed whacking, I throw the weed whacker over, right? And now like I jump on the fence, but now I'm on the inverted side of the barbed wire. So like I can't figure out how to get over this barbed wire. It was pretty easy to get in, but not easy to get out. And like I'm sitting here like a cat like clinging on, and I look over my shoulder and there's this 1,700-pound buffalo. I can see half of his face and his eyes just staring me down like, what the fuck are you doing, idiot? And I'm like, why didn't you tell me? Like to the guy who's like standing, I was like, you have one job. Like, and you didn't, you didn't tell me. So fortunately, the buffalo did not have it in for me that day. I got over, but eventually the reason this place is cool is because this is when I started to realize that I wasn't the same as other people. Like I realized my work ethic was different, but then I started to realize like I actually like am different because this company was started by this guy who just got out of jail. So the person who started the company I was working for just got out of jail. He was in jail for 18 years for stealing supplies from Bayer to run meth labs, right? He hired all of his cellmates to be management. Okay.
It's a solid game plan. Yeah, makes sense.
This was bananas. Yeah. And somebody told me, so I had no clue what unions were or anything about this stuff, but somebody told me like, hey, we're all supposed to get paid the same as everybody else if we're doing the same job in the same community, right? And I was like, oh, and that would have been like that would have been practically double what we were making, right? I also saw like some papers, and I realized that, and this after doing some research, I realized that our company was getting paid half of the amount of every other company to clear the polls, right? And so I was like, okay, I think this is like greased palms, right? So, so I did some research and I looked up, and this is when, Google was really coming into familiarity. And I looked up how to write a legal document, and I took the document to the union meeting, right? And I was like, hey, we need to get paid the same amount as all of our peers. Mind you, I'm 24 years old. Everybody I'm working with is like 35 plus, right? I'm working with grown men and I'm a kid. And I bring this to them, and like these people are just drunk. And they're like, "Fuck yeah, give us our money!" Right? And I'm like, "Shut up!" Like, I'm like, "Cut! You're not
way
like,
low.
You're not helping us." But I did all these like, whereas, we're in anyway. So I wrote this 11-page document, and we actually got it. They gave us the thing. Our company went under, but all those guys got hired out by the other companies. And I was a hero. I was a folk hero. I got a letter from the San Diego Gas and Electric, and they said, "Do not look into this matter any further." And that's all it said. Like no other typeface, no signing, no nothing. It was like I was like, okay. I was like, I need to leave. So I couldn't even take advantage of the raise. And I started this company called Roadrunner Sports. And I was a salesperson. Effectively, I was number one of 75, 76 salespeople. I'm sorry, number one of 150. And I got there within 3 months. I was really good at what I did, and I realized, I realized like, okay, I'm not normal, because usually if somebody was number one, it would take them a couple years. And I was like, okay, there's something else going on. But you have to understand, when you get abused your whole life and you get put down by everybody. I mean, like when I say I got put down as a kid, like the church choir director asked me not to sing. Like, that's church, right? Like, that's Jesus's love. Like, he's telling you, can you just lip sync, please? Like I didn't have those open doors. So I didn't have the ego. So it took me a lot of very stark moments to realize that I was actually like capable. Because I thought it was just like, I thought I had to work harder than everybody else. And I thought that was how, I was like, well, I accelerate my peers because of my work ethic. But then I realized, that there was a different something that worked in my brain. and so became, number one, very rapidly. And then the top salespeople got asked to change the culture of the company. And I had my presentation, and I'm horrible. Like, if I had practiced this conversation, like, it would suck. Like, and I'm not saying it's great. I'm just saying it would have sucked. Like, it would have been toilet. Like, I think there's some bits that you'll be able to salvage and piece something together. I think you've got a great editor. But I can't practice. So I had practiced. They forced us to practice the speech because it was in front of everybody. And I was like, no, please don't make me practice. Like, but they're like, yeah, you're practicing. The day, like, literally, like, I'm about to go up. I already have my presentation. I changed my entire speech as I was walking up. And I boomed. I started talking from the back, and I nailed it. I mean, I nailed that presentation, and it was completely impromptu. And the next day, I went to the director of marketing and I said, hey, can I work for you? I'll work for free. And I didn't know this, but the HR director, and the CEO had all said after my presentation, we need to get this guy, like, doing something else too. And so she's like, well, we have to pay you. So effectively, I sold shoes from 4:30 in the morning till 12:30. And then I actually went unbilled so I could do it. But then I would I would work from 1:00 until 12:30, 1:00 at night, in the marketing department. My director of marketing gave me this project, and I didn't want to be minimized to this, like, punching holes and stapling papers. So I worked as hard as I could on this project, and I said, okay, here you go. And she's like, what are you doing? I was like, well, this is the project. And she's like, Paul, she's like, this was supposed to take you 6 months. She's like, it took you 2 weeks. She's like, I don't have anything for you. And I was like, well, there's a postcard that's been sitting there because it doesn't have a project manager. Can I manage that? Right? Can I project manage that? So I project managed that postcard. Now, mind you, as a marketing intern, I'm making $7 an hour. As a salesperson, I'm making $75,000 a year. Right. So it's the difference. It's literally like the difference of like $60,000. Right. And ultimately I moved to full-time intern and took a significant pay cut. But that postcard, our average response rate on a postcard was 0.5%. The postcard I project managed got a 2.5% conversion. So they gave me the entire direct mail program, which was 40 million pieces a year. And about a month and a half into that, started crushing those results. About a month and a half into that, there was a guy who'd been, who was like a very seasoned veteran. He was like 50 years old, and he was responsible for managing all the vendors, Nike, Adidas, all the cool ones, right? Puma, etc. And he got fired. And so I said, hey, do you guys mind if I'm going home to Portland where Nike and Adidas are headquartered? I go, do you mind if I go to Nike and Adidas while I'm home? And they laughed at me. They're like, oh, that's so cute. The marketing intern wants to go to Nike and Adidas. And they're like, sure, yeah, you can go. And I went to them and I said, hey, Nike, here's how you can make more money through us. And Adidas, here's how you can make more money through us. Those two companies gave us $40,000 to cooperative marketing dollars. The guy who had been fired had raised $75,000 in total the year before. So now they gave me that entire program, which I turned in 3 months to $1.5 million of cooperative marketing dollars while I was managing. And then I created, I didn't know about Amazon. It was more books at that time, but I created a dropship program. When I was on the phones, like, somebody would call up for a 14 EE New Balance, right? And we didn't have it. But when I was at the employee sale, there was a 14 2E New Balance, right? And I'm like, well, what if we could take all these odd sizes, and what if we could, like, submit the order directly to New Balance versus inventory them? And so I said, what if we could put these online and drop ship them? And I didn't know it was a thing. So I created this program. This drop shipping program turned into $1.5 million. We started turning our inventory turns were 60 days with that new program, and we had turned our inventory every 5 weeks instead, which for a retail organization is a big deal. Is a national retail organization. So so I am on the fast track. I literally the president of Nike's at Roadrunner Sports. I did my research. Nike at the time was all Foot Locker. They weren't serious athletic, right? They were all aesthetics. They weren't serious. So they weren't serious athlete. And they certainly weren't in the running category. And so when Nike came to visit, and it was the president of Nike, the guy underneath Phil Knight and all the brass, and we're sitting at the table, and Nike's asking us questions, and nobody knew an answer. And I was sitting there, but I was still an intern, right? And I'm like, I don't think I should answer. I don't think. And then finally I realized, like, we just look like tool bags. So I'm just going for it. So I just started talking. I'm like, look, I was like, look, you guys, nobody trusts your product. Like, nobody trusts your running shoes, right? Nobody trusts that yet. But everybody loves your apparel, right? We need to parlay the apparel into letting them know that you're now as serious about your shoes, and we can build trust that way. And I told them the marketing plan. They bought it. They loved it. Like 2 weeks later, I followed the wrong girl from beautiful San Diego to Purgatory, Ohio.
All of Ohio. No,
where I lived was. I'm not saying I love Ohio.
Right.
Hey, I'm still here. I'm still here.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation the other day with somebody that had recently moved here, probably within the last year. They were from the West Coast, and he's like, I just came out here to follow family. And I was like, you know what I love about Ohio is that there's nothing to really love about Ohio. I said, but there's also nothing to really hate about Ohio. Like, typically the weather's usually halfway decent. There's no earthquakes or volcanoes or no tornadoes or hurricanes or tsunamis. I said, so it's, it's okay.
Yeah.
but it's not terrible.
Yeah.
So, but there are parts where I could see you getting yourself in a little bit of a precarious situation.
I was in the one where, like, you have the Amish that don't put the orange thing on the back of their buggy.
Yeah.
Okay? Like,
yeah,
that part.
Yeah.
Living in, like, this woman's parents' basement, in the middle of nowhere. I was being suppressed and told not to talk. It was bad. I went from living on the beach in San Diego to there, Ohio. I love Ohio, actually. And if the apocalypse comes, it's like supposed to be one of the places where you're good. So, on top of actually being, the thing I love about Ohio is, so I've lived in 8 different states. Okay. Most of the years I've been on the West Coast, Portland and San Diego, but I've lived in Maine. I've lived in Colorado, Denver. I've lived in Las Vegas. I've lived in Hawaii. I mean, I've lived in a number of places. The people are beautiful here. The thing that I love about Ohio is, so when you go to Portland or California, you'll have a very pretentious conversation with somebody, but you'll think it's an amazing conversation, right? You'll think like, oh my God, this is going to be my best friend for the next like 20 years, right? 2 years later, you realize you're having the exact same conversation that you had on night one. It never goes any deeper. It is all superficial. All they talk about is politics and like it's and how much better each other is than each other. But in Ohio, they're not so friendly on night one. Ohio, they're more guarded. They're one eyebrow up, right? But once you're in, you're in. Like once you're in, your family. And I thought that was a beautiful place to raise, my daughter. So when I decided to have a kid, I thought Ohio was actually a really good place. But this the CEO of Roadrunner Sports was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm following, this lady." He's like, "You're on the fastest track to executive I've ever seen in my entire life." He's like, "And you're gonna go to the middle of nowhere, Ohio." I'm like, "Yeah, I am." Well, he was right. He was right from that perspective. I couldn't get a job. I consulted from some of my Roadrunner Sports contracts for a while. And then I finally got a job in Twinsburg, which was 75 miles away.
It's a hike.
each way. It was 75 miles in winter. That blows donkey.
Yeah.
So, and I was working for this one company. I finally got a job working for this one company. I turned $230,000 of cooperative marketing dollars into 2.3 million in a couple months. And so literally, I literally 10x'd what the person, my predecessor, had done. I left. We had to be there at 8:30, and we had to work till 5:30. I left my house at 4 a.m. to get there on time one day that it was snowing. Okay. I realized that I'm going to not make it in time. Right. I realized I'm going to be about 5 minutes late. And so I call, because now I have a cell phone. So this is fast forward a little bit. And I called the marketing director and I'm like, hey, I'm going to be a few minutes late. It's the worst snowstorm, right? And I walk in the door and he literally like puts his finger to me and like is like, come over here. He's like, what's the deal? Like I'm like, I left 4.5 hours ago, literally. But just no leeway. I'm like, and this one company, and I don't want to name the name, but like the HR director would chase women down the hall and measure their capri pants. And if they were more than 12 inches from the ground, they had to go home. Everyone only got 2 days of vacation a year, and they subtracted that from your vacation. One of my friends, they counseled him for going to the bathroom too much, and they gave him a smaller cup. Like that was.
So, hey, just don't be quite as hydrated, right? So what from you're building this whole, kind of the ground up, you're essentially pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. You find yourself in Ohio, and then how does that translate into, because you mentioned earlier, ibogaine and the ayahuasca.
Yeah.
So where does that bridge come in that, what got you to where you are at now?
Yeah.
And I have a very super cursory understanding, but,
yeah, it's coming quick. So worked another job, got fired. Only time I've ever been fired because we were lying to our customers. And I told the CEO that we were lying and I wouldn't lie, but I'd do it with the truth. And she couldn't handle that.
Like, that's a bad option. Don't do that.
Yeah. So she fired me, and then I started a company called Insurance. I started at a company called insurance.com. Long story short, I inherited a $500,000 book of business, and I turned that into 70 million over the course of annual run rate over the course of the next 2.5 years. Really solidified my footing from a business perspective there, although I was only making $60,000 a year at that time. They were making decisions to go public. We were making the wrong decisions for the business. So I tried to tell the CEO 3 times. He wouldn't listen. And so I ultimately left and I started my own company. I started from nothing. Literally, I think between me and my wife at the time, we had negative 12. Like I carried her debt, so we had like negative $12,000. And I started the company as a consulting company. Went from $60,000 a year to $60,000 a month, and got bored of that after 4 months. So I started brokering deals, went to $120,000 a month, and got bored of that. And so then I took all that money and I tried to build tech. I realized that this is where I realized in business that people aren't always out for the win-win. I realized that that I was very naive, and I signed some bad contracts and learned lessons the hard way, and got raked over the coals. 2011, I decided to insource technology, and ultimately turned that company from nothing, completely bootstrapped organization, into the well into the 9 figures. And during this time, because there's 2 passions that I have, like outside of my daughter. One of them is how I volunteer, and the other one is my healing journey, right? And so what happened with this company is I really started to establish some really, what I was trying to do is I was trying to take kids who were in my situation, and I try to give them the moment that I had that summer with my grandparents. I try to give them their pivot moments. And so so what's happened now in Ohio, in Ohio, in the greater Cleveland area, is when a teacher in the greater Cleveland area has a kid who's really smart, but is looking at 2 different paths, the wrong one and a decent one, they call me in to work with that kid. And so every year I get several kids around the Cleveland area, and we work on them with like entrepreneur projects and public speaking projects, other things. And then I also work with them on trying to learn about other decisions. Just to put one into perspective, there was this kid who I was working with, and he was a joke. He had this like rose gold grill, right? It was funky, right? And he was like trying to show me his like stack, right? And it was like this big, and I was like showing him like the unlimited credit cards, right? So I had some fun, but at the end of the day, I was like, look, dude, here's the deal. In life, there's pretenders and contenders, and you are a pretender right now. And if you want to become a contender, I'll work with you, but otherwise, don't waste my time. That weekend that I told him that, his 4 best friends went to go rob a jewelry store, which he was going to go with them. He decided not to go because of that statement. He stayed behind. They got caught. They got arrested. I think the first one just got out of jail literally like a couple months ago. And this has been like 7 years or 8 years. And he ended up working for me. He bought a house at 20 years old. He ended up making like $150,000 a year, bought a house at 20 years old. At 23, he started a company. He's about to have a kid. Super cool. And work with a lot of kids like this in the greater Cleveland area. So trying to create that pivot moment for these kids. The other thing, and we're right about to get into ayahuasca and iboga and all the healing goodness, right? All the Scylla and this fun stuff. The other thing that I work with is I went over to Africa, and when you're in America and you help people, they think they're entitled to the help. And it's not very gratifying, candidly. I found that something that I'm working on in Cleveland and more systemically is, in a lot of people's minds, it's either poverty or celebrity. So there is no middle. And what I'm trying to do is get the bridge to the middle, so that they understand that it's not, NBA or bust. It's not YouTube star or bust, right? Mm-hmm. That there's a middle and there's a path up. Over in Africa, it's the converse. Over in Africa, they're extremely grateful for anything. They actually don't want you to just hand them things. They actually want they believe that the key to their future is education. So you have these people who are 20. The life expectancy is 38 years old. Okay, and they think that their path is education. And so I've worked with a number of these. I've worked with a number of villages at this point, and worked on getting them. There was one day Juliet and I were leaving Africa, and we'd done classrooms and bathrooms for this particular village. at the schools, and I noticed they were kicking a soccer ball made out of paper and tape, right? And I was like, athletics is actually a way that if somebody was actually good at soccer or football, they could actually like make it out, and they could provide for their entire village and lots of surrounding villages and help get medical supplies, etc. So I was like, they really need a real soccer ball in order to be able to do that. And so I asked them, I said, hey, can you give me your list of school supplies for the next year? Including like a soccer ball, and like, what is your wish list? They gave me a wish list that if I were to buy from Walmart in America, it would cost me $400 total, right? And their list cost them $9,000, right? And I'm like, you're getting ripped off. Then I started looking into it, and they weren't. The taxes and the shipping make these items prohibitive, right? And one of the items on their list was a box of paper. The cheapest box of paper I could get there landed was $700. And I realized, and I'm trying to outfit a whole bunch of villages, and I want it to sustain, right? And so I was like getting creative on this one. I'm like, let me think about this, because the paper isn't sustainable. Plus, I hate cutting down trees in the Amazon. And so I thought of the individual whiteboard, and I realized an individual whiteboard with a pen and eraser was $4 landed. And so I outfitted, I think like 1,250 students with an individual whiteboard, and I outfitted teachers with a whiteboard for each classroom. I'll tell you, out of all the things that I've ever donated or done, this is the one that had the most impact, because teachers were calling me, or they weren't calling me, they were making WhatsApp videos that they were giving to somebody in their village where they're crying, talking about how this has revolutionized the way that they get to teach, because they've never before been able to get real-time feedback from the students. And now when they're watching them on the whiteboards, they can actually track their progress and realize when they're behind or not. So it's completely changed the game. And so like that's one of those things that I am harping in on, because there's so many villages that need that help. Okay. So here I am, right? I've now become monetarily very successful. Fulfillment from my daughter is through the roof. My philanthropic efforts are so fulfilling. I love them. I live for them. They're amazing. But I can't manage a relationship properly, right? And like, I'm not saying that the people that like I got in relationships with were great, right? But I'm also saying that I like contributed, and I'm not an arguer, because I hate arguing because of like watching my parents, right? And watching all the yelling that happened as a kid. But like, I realized like I was relationship deficient. And so when I split so going through the childhood that I went through, I was never going to have my daughter have to go through anything that I went through, right? And so I was going to stay with Juliet's mom until Juliet was 18, right? That was my plan. And then I realized I heard that kids don't watch how you treat them, but they watch how you treat each other for what a relationship is supposed to look like. And so even though we weren't yelling at each other, I was literally just getting like sick when I would like hug her, right? Not Juliet, but Juliet's mom. And I was like, and Juliet is so smart and intuitive. I'm like, she's going to see right. She's going to see right through this any day now. And so I realized like I had to break up with her mom so that I had a chance to show Juliet what a good relationship looked like, and so that I could be an example. And so obviously that was a horribly difficult decision, and one that I never wanted to give to my daughter. The other thing that helped me get okay with it is that my daughter's never faced adversity, right? Unlike me, right, who went through a few things, right? She'd never faced it. And I thought to myself, this might be like a way to give her some adversity so that she can deal with things in life, so that like, a hangnail doesn't paralyze her, right? Or like what are those words? What are the words that the kids like the trigger words,
Oh.
right? That people need to go to
You're right.
counseling beds in college if they hear the wrong word. I didn't want that to be I wanted to prepare my daughter for real life. So that was the other reason I accepted, that the divorce had to happen. Now, I didn't know that she was about to be faced with the adversity of COVID, right? So in fairness to me,
Timing.
like the timing of that was, was insane. But for my daughter, if not for anybody else, I realized I had to get better at relationships. I've been so self-sufficient that relying on somebody, communicating with somebody, all of that stuff, it just wasn't necessary for me and for my survival, right? And so
skill never learned, huh?
Yeah.
How old was your daughter when you got a divorce?
I think she was 6.
Okay.
When we separated. Or like, when we made the first action. I mean, like when you say like, yeah, I didn't have an example. I remember being in college and my roommate was talking to his mom, right? I was like, this is weird. They're talking. And I was like, this is the strangest thing. And then he ended with, I love you. And I was like, did you just say I love you? He's like, yeah, I tell her I love you every time. I'm like, oh, holy shit. I only thought that happened on TV. I didn't think that happened. I didn't know that happened in real life. Right. Yeah. So if I was going to be these things that I wanted to be, and if I was going to have a chance, I had to change me. And I had to change me from the inside out. I was a top salesperson, right? I know how to get somebody to like me. I know how to get a cult following, right? But that's empty, right? And I realized that I needed to be vulnerable and I needed to be who I'd never shown anybody on the outside if I was actually going to attract and appeal what I was looking for and had a chance or a prayer at a real relationship and to show Juliet what a real relationship could be. So that was my intention when I started. And effectively, Amanda, who's Tony's met, started, she's wicked intuitive, and she started down her healing journey. She had a very different side of abuse, and she took a very different path than I did. And she started her healing journey, and I was watching her from afar, but I started to watch her be able to do things. She started to manifest things. Like she started to manifest like situations. She believed it, she thought it, and it happened. And I was like, what the hell? Right? Because this to me is like voodoo, right? Like I hear about manifest. Yeah. Your brain is strong and all this. Yeah. And all this, nonsense. And I was like, I'm pragmatic and right. And I'm a businessman. Like, I'm not into all this shit. And then I started watching her and I would listen to her on the phones, and she started like talking to people like as an intuitive, and she would be talking to people she's never talked to. And she'd be like, hey, what is that room? Who's the blonde hair boy with curls? There's a Porsche poster. There's a knit quilt on the bed. The walls are yellow. Like, what is that? And they'd be like, that's my brother's room. And that's what my brother looks like. She's never met this person. These are literally random people that came through her website. I'm like, wait, what is this? Like, there is something here. So she started getting into or learning about ayahuasca, right? And she started getting into energy healing and ayahuasca. And so
I'm going to disclaim a few things. I would never, 2 years ago, I would never say anything that I'm about to say. I wouldn't believe if I were having this conversation, I wouldn't believe anything that I'm about to say. Literally none of it. But I've seen this stuff for myself, and I've seen the power that it has, and I've also seen the recklessness with which it's used. And so I want to talk about a few things, and I can only talk from my experience, right? I can't talk for other people, but I can tell what I've seen and what I think intentions are. So watching her do these things and go on these paths, and realizing that conventional counseling is not for me, right? I am literally like, I'm not as smart as Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting, but I am literally like that guy on the sofa singing, like, making fun of the therapist. It's not for me. And so I knew that I needed something, and I started to look more into like, what is that? The energy flashing, like the light flashing, EMDR.
Oh yeah.
I started looking like EMDR therapies, right? Energy therapies, etc., like energy healings and those modalities. And they were fascinating to me, but the first one that I happened to stumble into was ayahuasca. And I went to a hack. I went to a hack.
No.
But it didn't matter. I mean, she mixed psilocybin with Aya on my first journey. Like, she left when we were still under. Like, she just did shit you're not supposed to do, right? But it didn't matter because the plant medicine was so strong, and it's not even it's not even what it's supposed to be anymore. Like, it hasn't been true ayahuasca for 20 years. Even in Peru, it's very difficult to get to the purest stuff. But it is so strong that you can have some really good experiences, even if you don't have the right shaman. And I don't suggest just going reckless with it at all. I suggest going in truly to heal. And I suggest...
Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
So when you we're looking at these different healing journeys, and you said you found ayahuasca, as someone who doesn't know what that is, other than maybe I've heard it recently, can you explain when you decided to do that, what you thought it was and what you expected out of it, even though you had a hack as a shaman?
Sure.
And what that even is supposed to be?
Yeah, and for those that don't know ayahuasca, it's essentially a kind of a tea that's brewed that has plant materials that basically when it's brewed, it creates a psychedelic experience for the drinker of the
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and Tony can probably explain it better than anyone in this room, technically.
He's got all the chemical. All the back.
We'll leave it cursory, which is perfect.
Okay.
So effectively, you're going to access parts of your brain and synapses of your brain that you have never been able to access for, is effectively what you're going to be able to do through this psychedelic, right? And so effectively what I want to do, and the reason I'm going in, is because I want to be able, because nothing I've done has worked before. And so I am trying to, my intention was to access various parts of my brain that I don't usually have access to, but that maybe they could give me a different perspective. And that was my goal. And it really did work. So I've never been mad at my birth mom, for example. I've never been mad at her because she was 14 years old. Right. And she was dumb. Like she's a really intelligent woman. I've met her since. But she was dumb at the time. She made poor decisions at the time.
I don't know many 14-year-olds that aren't dumb.
Yeah.
Or make poor decisions,
Yeah.
right? I think that's kind of what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Right. She just brought me into it. That was the thing. But I've never thought that I was mad at my mom. And the thing about ayahuasca that becomes really cool when you're in it with people who are really in it, who really believe, is you actually you create a culture, a microculture of who's in the group, and you get really connected. So when somebody's going through something, the other people can feel it sometimes, and vice versa. And sometimes there's not that connection. But I remember I'm starting to process mom stuff, right? And I'm starting to process mom stuff, and I realized I'm mad at her, but I'm not mad at her for any other reason than I just wish she would have let me go earlier, right? But while I'm going through my mom stuff, I've done ayahuasca with there's two women that are also doing ayahuasca with me. They are both in the birthing position going into labor while I'm going through my mom stuff, and they are on two different parts of the room that don't see each other, and they're going through this stuff, right? Like I know this is what I said. This is why I prefaced everything with 2 years ago, I wouldn't have believed any of it, right? But I have seen it for myself, and there is this connection that that happened in that room. The other thing I think on my first Aya journey is, for the first time, I realized when I was 3.5 years old, when I was kidnapped, when I was teaching school to all those, to the circle, right, of all these animals around me, right, and I created this huge circle around me. I was teaching all of these pieces of paper to protect me and to be a force shield around me, so that anybody who got close, so that nobody could get close to me, either bad or good. And so literally, like, this shield around me, all these things were basically trained to take the hits, to take the love. So they never actually penetrated me. And that's why when somebody I loved like broke up with me, that's why I was able to dismiss it and move on instantaneously. That's why when somebody said hurtful things to me, it didn't stick, right? I was able to be resilient and move on. I had trained this army around me, and now I'm trying to teach it to go away. Now I'm like, please, like, I know you've protected me. Please, like, let me live. I know the liability now. I know the risk, but please, like, let me feel, right? Let me have those things, because the only thing I've ever truly felt is for my daughter. And that is, so love is defined, and I learned this in iboga while doing iboga, which we'll get to in a second. By doing iboga last week, in Costa Rica, love is unconditional acceptance, right? That is the definition, and it's my definition. Nobody else has to use it. It's my definition. I think it's a beautiful definition of the word. I have had unconditional acceptance for absolutely no one, including myself, except for my daughter, until this, until this point. So that was my first ceremony with ayahuasca. Those are the two things that I took out of it, along with some amazing visuals, right? Like just the prettiest, like, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory shit, right? It's just like, just.
Did you feel things that these other ladies were going through?
I did. So the hack, so the shaman who was a hack. So Amanda, Tony, if you recall, is a very beautiful woman. Really stunningly beautiful. And the shaman was trying to convince her that she was supposed to be touched, and like, and she was a woman, right? It was a woman and a woman. But like, that was actually one reason why I had to be like one eye open, like, during this whole thing, because she was trying to get her to like almost make out with her during the session, which if you're on ayahuasca, the last thing you're thinking about is sexual experiences. It is so far from removed from where your brain's at. And but then once I was able to separate them, and get her to leave her alone, and once I let her know that I was conscious enough to not mess with her, she started to go into like, she's a warrior. She is so strong. And I saw her for her, right? But she's been beat up her whole life. And so being she had parents who put her in foster systems while they kept the other two brothers and sisters like at 10 and 11 years old, right? Like, so I talk about feeling not wanted, right? And both addicted, both addicts, right? Like those kinds of things. And then obviously that's going to beget certain types of relationships, right? So she's drawn to people who completely like are horrific to her and continue to put her, right, tarnish on her brass. And so I was able to see, like, if you take that tarnish away, what she is, and like elevate, right? So that's how I connected to her and who she really is. and like and this is gonna sound so dumb, but I'm gonna tell you guys a story, and you guys will actually maybe believe me. But I was connecting to a past life when she was like more like into the Native American, in a past energy, past life, and she was strong and she was fierce, and I realized, like, even though if you were to look at us, like, you know, I'm the CEO and founder of this like multi-million-dollar company doing all this stuff. I'm actually minuscule compared to her power and her strength, right? And that's how I was connecting. But on paper, it never looks like that, right? I mean, on a photo it does, but on paper it doesn't. So then my next experience was that night, and I had the complete opposite experience. I was in hell. Everything was hell. It was like there were dogs on the wallpaper in the bathroom, and like they were like coming at me. They were like coming out of the walls, like just like, you know, like demeaning. Like, I hate screaming metal, and like all I could hear was screaming metal. I was trapped in status quo, which sounds dumb, but for me, like, that's my hell. I was stuck doing the same thing over and over and over, and this like unlimited line of like complaints in a place that has no windows, and I'm very claustrophobic. So this, like, it was, and so the music, the imagery, the position that I was stuck, and that was supposed, and where I was at was that was going to be the rest of my life.
And physically, you're in a room and you're safe.
Yeah.
This is all like,
yeah.
Okay.
And here's the thing with ayahuasca: you can actually open your eyes and have like 80% of your motor skills anytime you want to. Okay. When you go into ayahuasca, you're not stuck. Okay. You don't have to stay wherever you're at. You can open your eyes. But I wanted to go through this. I literally, like, I forced myself to close my eyes, to go through the experience, to let it happen, because I thought that it was right. I thought I needed to go through it, and it was hell, and it lasted way longer than I wanted it to, but it did end. Right. And that's what I kept telling myself. This will end, right?
Do you think you're going on some sort of like mental sorting experience, like where you're trying to work things out, like through your own psyche, or why were you so determined on, I need to go through this?
I was determined because I was going to let the medicine do the work, right? I was going to let the medicine take me where it is. But I have learned since doing iboga, there's a difference between ayahuasca and iboga, and we'll talk about that here in literally like a few more minutes. But I wanted the medicine to work, right? So the next
from
night,
the understanding that you had, like what this was supposed to be help you with,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
Were you prepared that, like, did they say like this is a potential outcome? Like the evening could go from one thing to like your version of hell. Like, were you prepared for that?
No.
Okay.
I didn't think it would be all sunshine and roses, but my first experience was so good.
So did you have like a second cup then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it wasn't just like a real long. Okay.
Yeah. So
how long does that?
About 4 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. You can do more, and it will take you in for longer, but it doesn't get more intense. So that's so if you do more than a certain amount, all it does is elongate. And you guys have to understand, I've spent my life being in control since I was done with my parents, right? Aside from like my emotional stuff that I buried like crazy, right? I've been in control, right? Like, so I picked up this thing, like, if I go to an NBA game, everybody that walks by me, everybody that I'm sitting, everybody that I see, I catalog. And if I see him twice, I catalog them again. And then if I see him a third time, I catalog. Like, I can track everybody I've seen. So if I see somebody again, I know that I've seen them 3 other times, and I know exactly where I saw them and what they were doing when I saw them, right? My brain catalogs these protections, right? Then the minute that I leave the NBA game, they're gone. I don't ever have it. Like, I don't retain any of it. It's literally for my protection if somebody's like coming after me, right? So when I talk about control, like, I mean control, right? So going into ayahuasca, like, my whole point was to not have control, right? Like that was my goal. And so the second night I did one experience, and that was the night we saw extraterrestrial and we saw other universes, and I saw like the physical like pulses in Amanda like going through, and I saw like and it was amazing. It's amazing, like open eye visuals and experience, and I was stuck in it longer than I wanted to be. I probably drank too much tea, but it was amazingly beautiful. And over the next year and a half to 2 years, I did probably 12 more experiences, maybe 13 journeys. I mean, I've been to Soul Quest. I've done it with 90 people. I've done it by myself, right? With somebody watching. Every experience except for the second one has been really visually good. But it's been visually good. Not everyone has taught me something. But I've had a reasonable experience with every ayahuasca ceremony since then. And I do believe that the plant medicine can show you things, but I do want to transition to iboga, because I went down to this place in Costa Rica, and so iboga is basically like, I've learned a lot of misinformation about iboga. But iboga is really like meet your fucking maker. Okay? Like,
sounds scary.
Yeah. It is.
Sounds terrifying.
It is. I realized like with ayahuasca, I was getting visuals and I was getting some things, but I really wanted to take it to the next level. And this place that I went is super connected with Africa, which I'm super connected with. And so it just felt right. And Amanda and I were going to go, and we were both going to go. But the sad part is like, for right now, Amanda's given up on her healing journey, and I just haven't. Like, that's the difference. She's been, the people, just like people have taken advantage of her in life because of her circumstances, like that continued as she went into this stuff. And so she quit her journey. So she ended up not going. She ended up not going with me to Costa Rica. But I went, but I do want to, there's two other things that I've been doing in the interim, and I've been working with two different energy healers along with the ayahuasca, and these energy healers, like, it is amazing. One of them will be able to find whatever I'm dealing with. And like, she's bananas. Like, she'll like I'll say, like, I'm sad because like my number 2 in my company and I was with her for like 13 years. She was my number 2 for like 13 years. We had to break up. Right. Like not like as a work relationship. Right. Which is hard because she's been like literally like from month 2 through 13 years plus years. She was there. And so much of the reason we are what we were is because of her. If not most of the reason we were what we were is because of her. But I'm like having this hard time breaking up with her, right? And the energy healers like 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 2 to 3, 3 to 5, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 5 to 10, 5 to 10, 5 to 11, 5 to 11, 12, 12, 13. What happened when you were 12? I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, what happened when you were 12? Like, who left your life at 12? And that was when my sister and I had to split, right? And she likens it, and that she goes and she's like, that's where your brain is processing this breakup. You have to, it's for the best, right? And it's just bananas. And she does it every time we have a session. It's unreal. The other energy healer that I'm working with, Susan, she goes and you talk to her for a few minutes, but she doesn't really care about that conversation, honestly. She just goes and she gets in your field, and she, like, you hang up the phone or the Zoom, and she works for like 90 minutes, and then you get back together and she tells you what she saw. She tells you what your higher self saw, right? And it's funny because like you're in this period where she's working in you, right? And you're like, yeah, whatever. You're really, yeah, ha, 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 right? But you'll realize like all of a sudden, like you'll be really sad for no reason, right? Or like you'll start laughing out loud for no reason. And you're like, and then she'll tell you what she was doing. And then you'll realize like why you went on the emotional roller coaster, even though it was well. But I have one finite example. So So Susan, at the end of each session, she does past lives, right? And she's like, dude, you lived on this farm, but you were like the one on the hill, and you took care of everybody, and then like you got like bludgeoned to death. Like all of my past lives are like she's like taking that energy, she's clearing it so I don't have to carry it to my next life, right? And I'm like, look, every time after I'm done with her, like I feel totally different, right? I actually got to like higher self with her, like through her, where I was processing anxiety and stress outside of my body, so it didn't tax my body, which was it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen or felt. And but I know to everybody else this sounds like voodoo, right?
Yeah. So what do you think that is? Is there some kind of another, people oftentimes like references like dimensions or different fields or energy waves, or like how do you make sense and connect it all to the your understood world that you've always known before, and it seems like you're entering into this new understanding, I guess.
Yeah.
How do you explain that?
So with iboga, I finally came to peace with I don't have to. I actually don't need to think. I don't need to have like these conscious thoughts. I can let things come to me. And that's what I had in my first iboga ceremony, which I promise is like 30 seconds away at this point. But the one thing that the energy healer did with me is when I got back from being kidnapped when I was 4.5, I had a very distinct dream, right? And in this dream, like I ended up in this house where just the floorboards were left. I had a gun, a musket. There were the trees, there were forest, there was this neighbor, there were these bushes, there were these shrubs. It was very specific, very vividly. I can remember all of it, right? She, on the last time that I talked with her, this was just like February, she was going through my past lives, right? And she starts describing that dream that I had at 4.5 in absolute 100% explicit detail. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, okay, there's just some shit that is just way beyond me, way above me, right? But she was putting details in that, and I have told that dream only to my siblings when I was like 12 years old. I haven't told it to anybody else. So there's no catalog of it, right? So that's when I just realized like we really just don't know. And I know I sound bananas to people, and I don't care because I know what I witnessed and I saw. And I used to get mad like when people like who love Jesus would say like, Jesus is the answer, right? Or people who were Mormons would say Mormon's the answer, or you'll go to hell if you don't do that. Judaism says there is no Jesus, right? And I used to hate it when people were like, this is the truth. And then I realized like, what? For them, it is their truth, and they are their universe. So like we're just players in their universe, just like they're players in my universe, right? And so like now I don't let it bother me, but like so I don't care if you think I'm bananas. Like, and I'm not saying any of the three of you do, but I know what I would have thought of me 2 years ago, right? And so applying that, I can only imagine what people are thinking. So here's the difference between ayahuasca and iboga. Okay, so ayahuasca, is this journey. It can have some really cool visuals, but it is that. Ayahuasca is visuals. Okay. It shows you things. Okay. Iboga is action. And that's why it's a completely different healing process than ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is literally, it shows you visions. It shows you some things, and they're amazing. And it brought a lot of clarity to a lot of things in my life. Right. But iboga cut through all the shit and was like, this is you. This is what you got to deal with. This is how we're dealing with it. This is your reality. And so what I call iboga, what I learned in doing iboga is you. Iboga doesn't exist. It's literally you. You meet yourself to the core when you do iboga. And I'll walk through some examples. So I get to Costa Rica, and you can't eat past a certain point in time. And there's 2 ceremonies in my retreat. And they start from minute 1 that you get there. You start depriving yourself of everything that you're used to. They take away your cell phone, minute 1, right? They stop feeding you, minute 1. Iboga itself, which you do the first night, is a sleep. You don't sleep on iboga. Like you are, like your body shuts down, but you're as highly conscious as you've ever been in your entire life. More conscious than you've ever been.
Like shuts down and like paralyzed shuts down, or just like just too tired to do it?
No. Like you get up to walk and you fall down.
So shuts it down.
Like I got up to go to the bathroom, because you're laying down, you feel fine. I got up to walk and I'm like just fell right back down. Right,
and that's normal. Like
that's
expected to happen. Okay.
Yeah, they call it the wobbles. I call it like you're debilitated as fuck.
Did you know anybody with you? Because you said Amanda didn't go, right?
Yeah.
Did you know anybody?
No.
And you were,
which plays
were
out.
you like not scared shitless at this point? Or were you just like, I'm gonna accept it as it comes?
Okay.
Are you taking a bathroom break, Tony? Is there?
Let's
Want me
pause.
to pause real
I think
quick?
it sounds like a great
Yeah.
place to pause. We can do that real quick. Restroom break, and we left off in Costa Rica with how big was the group of people?
There were 6.
Okay, 6. So you were in Costa Rica with 6 people doing the iboga that you didn't know
With the wobbles.
with the
Yeah.
wobbles.
the wobbles.
With the
And I asked
wobbles.
if you were scared shitless.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. So let me catch momentum. So I've had such good experience with ayahuasca, but I haven't, and with my energy healers, but I haven't completely crossed the finish line. So I wanted to I felt like I had one more step in this phase of healing. I felt like this ayahuasca ceremony was the end of one phase because I've made so much progress, and it was the beginning of my next phase, right? Where I can start focusing on things that are like way healthier and not near as heavy, and deep. But I literally had to go to the bowels, in order to accomplish that from my perspective. So with iboga, like you asked if I was scared shitless, and like I was, but that's the story of night 2, not of night 1. Night 1, I was still naive, and I was so ready to heal, and I was like, I'm just gonna pack this shitty tasting sand into my mouth and try to fucking guzzle it with water and get it down, because it is disgusting. It's literally like packing sand in your mouth. And the only way you can get it down is like just letting it go with the water. This
isn't like a tea. This is like
No.
a substance.
Yeah, this is like a bottle of sand, and you literally you eat sand. It tastes worse, and then the only way to get it out, and then it sucks. It absolutely sucks. Then the thing that really sucks is that it because it's sand, it goes in all these like cracks and crevices of your mouth, and so you're still like working it out, kind of like with a dog with peanut butter, except for it doesn't taste as good. And so you're sitting there, and it's gross. But just like ayahuasca, it takes like 45 minutes or so to kick in, right? And so you're sitting there, and you're like, yeah, this is like not that big of a deal, right? But we're looking at this picture that we're staring at while we're in the transitional phase. And it's just a picture of this king, and it's a beautiful picture of this king. And then his face starts to morph. And you're like, okay, they might start kicking in. Then he starts winking, you know, like starts talking to you a little bit.
Okay.
You're like, okay, like, yeah, this is, I'm like, I'm going to go to my mat now because I need to go to my mat. And so on night one, I just succumbed to it and I didn't fight it. And again, just like with ayahuasca, you can open your eyes. You don't have the motor skills that you have with ayahuasca. Like you physically can't do certain things. But you have the mental capacity if you want to have the mental capacity, right? So you have the visuals on ayahuasca and psilocybin are more like Doctor Who, you know, little bit Charlie Chocolate Factory, like patterns, lights, etc. Iboga, that's not the vision. That's not the imagery. Iboga, you meet yourself. You told Sarah to fuck off on the playground in 2nd grade, and it's right there in front of you. Everything that you've ever done to anybody else is confronting you face on. There is no hiding. There is no running. I mean, yeah, you can open your eyes and avoid it, but that's not the point. Right? Like every negative thing that you've literally ever done, anything that you feel guilty about, anything that's like disgusted you about yourself, anything, it doesn't matter. It hammers you. And you have the visual. I mean, they're right there. The visuals are crystal clear. They are the most stunning visuals you've ever seen in your entire life. Right? But you being an asshole, anything that you've done wrong, you taking advantage of somebody, anything, it fucking comes back and it floods you. And if you're not ready to face it, don't fucking do iboga. Don't. Because you literally have to meet yourself, and you have to meet yourself, and you have to meet all the worst qualities about you and everything that you've done. And it sucks. And this ceremony, when you're under, it's a 6-hour ceremony. So it's not like, you know.
And this is on night one. Like you're just going right for it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is night one. Yeah. The Boga Boogie. So I'm going through this and the coolest thing that's ever happened to me besides my daughter happened on night one. Over time, night 2 will be the coolest thing, but I haven't fully processed night 2 yet. On night 1, I came to terms with myself that I'm actually okay with me and that I'm a good person. And, you know, as a CEO, you get judged a lot. People say a lot of things about you. I'm not proud of everything that I've ever done, but I also gave myself some allowance for the circumstances that I come from, and the situations that I was in, and I aggregated it all, and I netted, and there's, you know, 90% of anything that I ever did, if not more, wasn't intentional, and it wasn't that bad, relative, and then if you make it relative to things that happened to me, like it's really not bad. Right. So I was like, I got really okay with myself I can't say total like love fest with myself, but I accept myself for the first time. And that happened on night 1. The other thing that happened night 1 is my brain is a constant thought process. It's constantly like going through things, and it never stops. And literally, like last year, I thought about nothing for 3 fleeting seconds, right? And I was like, oh my God, I wasn't thinking about anything. That was cool. The other thing, so most of night 1 was spent facing myself and dealing with myself. The last part, I was like, okay, well, I'm good. So I started like trying to figure out how to create space in my brain, create blank space. And I started and it would start like at 2 seconds, and then 4 seconds, and then 8 seconds. And then like I'd crash and burn, right? I'd be like, oh, damn it, I had a thought, right? And then I'd like, okay, start over, right? And I started like realizing how to create space. And that was really cool because I've never, like literally in my life, I just haven't had that I haven't had that. And so
have you ever, though this is pales in comparison to, I'm sure, the experience, but have you ever tried to do like a deprivation tank or like the float tanks?
no.
It's we actually, I just did it for the first time recently, and it's a really, really neat experience because like it's this warm body temperature salt water. It's completely pitch black, and so you're as sensory, cut off as you can be. You might really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because that's like you like the concentrate, like trying to concentrate on nothing
Yeah.
is like,
It's like meditation on steroids. What you're talking
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
like trying
Yeah.
to like
you might want to
space,
give it a
like-
try. It's
Yeah.
it's if nothing else, it's really relaxing for your body.
Yeah.
So-
I absolutely might. If like, and I mean, yeah, so I don't know if I'm over claustrophobia yet.
Oh, I could see that.
I don't know if I'm there
You
yet.
have the option to crack the
Leave
crack
the door
open.
tank
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
one in Cleveland. Are you in Cleveland?
Yeah.
Yeah, we went
Yeah.
to one in Cleveland.
Okay.
So in Rocky Ridge or
Lakewood.
somewhere.
Okay.
Real close to Lakewood. Yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty cool. But
Okay. So yes, I will try. That's
Okay.
actually a good way to test my claustrophobia, right? So, because after this ceremony, like after this last week, everything I knew no longer exists. Everything is completely different, and it's the most exhilarating and confusing thing at the same time. So that was night one, but here's what happens with iboga. So the first 6 hours you're under and the visuals are hot, right? And you're, like it's coming at you, right? And you're going. The next 6 hours, you just feel like you got hit by a train. You can't sleep and you're isolated. You're in a room by yourself. Okay. Then the next 12 hours, you don't really feel like shit anymore. You don't feel normal, but you don't feel like shit anymore. But then you spend 12 more hours with yourself. So this is tough. This is a bitch. Like you're like you don't talk. You're just there in silence. You don't have phone. You don't have a book. You don't have anything. You're literally just there with your thoughts and silence in the middle of nature, in the middle of nowhere. And that was that 12 hours, and you have no concept of time, right? You don't know if it's 1 minute or 3 hours.
You put yourself in essentially voluntary solitary
Yeah.
confinement, but on a mind altering. So that does sound terrifying.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I had the advantage of is I had already spent 10 days with myself when I was 3.5. So
Been there, done that.
I thought I had home court advantage, but there are some times where I got to like there were some times that it hit me where I needed some kind of contact. But
did you have someone checking on you,
Yeah.
like peeking in, and you just didn't have like contact with them? Like there's people there making sure that like you're taking it okay and you're well.
yeah.
Okay.
But it's crazy. I mean, you haven't eaten for like, just to put it in, like, it's one of those weird things. Like you start to realize like how solitary confinement can really mess with a prisoner. Right. And like somebody checks on you like every like 4 hours, 5 hours. Right. But technically you can go up and walk to them. Like it's so you do have the ability to do that. But you don't, because the whole point is that you go and you're alone with your thoughts. And so I practiced like creating more space as best as I could. Sometimes I just had to get up and walk around. Like I couldn't take it anymore. And I hated everything about the fucking experience through 23 hours and 59 minutes. I hated it. At the 24th hour, I loved it and I couldn't wait to go back. Like once it was over, once that 24-hour period was over, like I couldn't wait to go back into it. Right. And that's like, I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's like self-punishment or something, but it was really weird. There was no way in my life that I was ever going to do it again. There was no way I was going back in for second ceremony until literally, and you do it at sunset. So at sunset, you're free. And the minute that sunset came, I was like, okay, I'm going back in. Right. It's very weird because now once it's over, you appreciate, but those 4 days, it's funny because I called like Juliet, because you get your phone back for a minute. And I'm like, Julia, like, it's so great to talk to you. I know you don't have this enthusiasm because for you, it's only been one day. But for me, it feels like it's been like 20 days. Right? And it really does. It feels like it's been 20 days. It is painful. So then the next day, they give you very little food. It's funny. Like one year in that day, they bring you some cantaloupe and they bring you like this broth. But like, and you haven't eaten, right? Like theoretically, you should be starving. You can't sleep during any of this, and not because they don't let you. You physically can't sleep. Your brain's still going. And they bring you cantaloupe, but like, you know, I had like 20 pieces of cantaloupe. I ate like 5 of them, even though I hadn't eaten for like 20 some hours, right? And it wasn't the semaglutide, Tony. So so then the next day, you wake up. You got to talk to the other people in the group. You kind of share your experiences a little bit, right? But it's really weird. Like everybody, even though everyone's been alone for so long, like you still aren't even social, like, which is really weird. Cause like now you can talk to other people and you don't want to. And that gets kind of weird. So then the next day I woke up, we went to these springs that were clear. And like we sent, you know, some things down the river or down the stream. And then that night you go back in. And I was like, dude, that rocked me physically. Like, and they're like, don't worry. The second night isn't bad because your toxins are all gone. You are completely you are detoxed. So they're like, one of the reasons it's so physically by the way, I didn't puke, but everybody else was blowing their brains out. Like they were literally like, ayahuasca can be the same thing.
I was just gonna say, did that happen with ayahuasca with you?
Yeah, no,
that happened.
No, I've never puked on ayahuasca. I've only puked from food poisoning from Subway sandwich. So
that can be brutal as well.
Yeah, that was brutal.
Like this made you throw up?
No,
but it made everybody else.
Yes, and when I say
supposed to happen,
yeah, like I've done Bufo, I've done Cambo. So these are other versions, right, of these things. Totally different. I haven't gone into those. But I've never puked. The shamans are always blown away. They're like, dude, your body is like, it's got some skills. But I want to purge actually, like you do. Cause like it's actually physically like you want to, cause even though you're not, like you feel it. But, so yeah, but like, it's funny. Like you have like super like, ripped out dudes like you who like are on like these supplements, right? And all this shit, right?
Oh.
Dude, they get hammered the worst. This dude was like, I mean, you looked at him, he was like one of the dudes that was in this. He was cut up. He was like in shape. He didn't have like an ounce of body fat. He barfed like but it's really weird because even though you're next to the barfer, like it feels like they're like far, far away, even though they're like 5 feet away from you.
It's probably a good thing.
Yeah,
right?
it really is, right? But yeah, and he's like these suckers when they're supplements, they think they're so good for their body, and then the minute that they detox, it tries to kick all this stuff out. So I am feeling so good, right? I'm like, okay, get into night 2, right? I'm gonna knock this shit out. And I was feeling happy. I'm like, I learned I like myself. I'm okay with myself. Like what, and they're like, and they're like telling us and they're lying to us in the best way possible. They're like, don't worry, it's easier. But then they're saying this the whole time until right before we do it. But it's easier physically because you're not like you're detoxed. So that's not messing with you anymore. Mentally, they set it up to fuck your brain over in the best possible way. And like,
so the body's already gone through the journey.
Yeah.
Now it's like, we're going to take your mind through it.
Yeah. That's effectively right. So all of a sudden like thunderstorms move in. It's ominous. The whole energy shifted and it palpably shifted. I was sitting there and I felt something come from the sky and literally like put a lock on my heart. And I felt like I was like in this freeze. I felt like my heart was constricted. All of a sudden, all the negative energy, and we all had it. We were all in an amazing, all of us, all the two people who run this, the two people that run this, the 6 of us or 5 of us, whatever it was, we all went from being like happy to this palpable evil and dark energy around us. And I don't know how the hell it happened, but it just happened. Now, I'm sitting looking at the kitchen, and they have this, those metal knife holders? You know, like when you have like metal on the wall and then you stick the knife. Yeah. So there was one, for whatever reason, they put their magnetic block like at head level. And so the only thing I can see out of the kitchen is this like knife, and it's a huge knife that I know they just use to cut up cantaloupe, right? But it's this huge knife at like head level, right? This energy is ominous. They're saying physically this will be much easier, but it'll be more tranquil. So I start freaking out. And everything that you talked about, were you scared? I got so scared. I started, and I felt like I was, I felt so uncomfortable, and all of a sudden, like every comfort, everything that I was okay, I wasn't okay, and I thought that, and I somehow my brain shifted into they are going to murder all of us at sunrise.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sounds terrifying.
Here's the thing. It's all beautiful at face value, right? Their mission, this place in Costa Rica. Now you take the flip side of it. You're doing voodoo in the middle of the jungle with these people that you don't know and you can't fucking walk, right? So all of a sudden,
like a bad movie.
Yeah, and he's not helping it because he's saying shit like, "Hey, I noticed last time you guys were on your sides more. If you guys could really go on your back, it's a better experience." Which to me was like exposing the throat, right? Just
trying to find all of the things that are bad about it.
So this guy takes iboga every day. He just eats it like Cheerios, right? And he walks around and he has and he acts normal, right? Within reason. And so I'm like, oh my God, I have to save everybody.
Oh no.
So I realize I can't go under. So I've now taken the medicine and there's nothing I can do to reverse it, but I can't go under. And so I start doing things like I start moving all my extremities, right? To try to fight this comatose that I know that I'm about to go in, because all of us are going to get murdered at midnight. My daughter, and maybe I can send you this picture. My daughter drew a picture of me before I went on this retreat, and it was her hand with an eyeball in the middle with 5 other eyeballs, and it was a rooster. Okay. She has no clue about the ayahuasca symbols or any of this stuff, right? She literally drew a palm with an eye in it that was also a rooster with these 5 other eyeballs, and she's never seen it. And she said, "This is a picture of you." And so, she's 10 years old. She can draw a picture of a person. She's drawn many before, right? So the fact that she drew me so abstract is bananas, right? And so now I'm realizing when I'm in this thing, that to me, the rooster represents sunrise. And I'm just blown away because that's when it all ends. Yeah, right?
Now you're really,
dude. So I asked for a cup of water. They have a pitcher of water at the front of the thing, at the front of the temple, right? Which is 20 steps away. I asked for a cup of water. He left the temple to go. I knew that he knew that I wasn't all the way in. I knew he knew I was fighting and resisting this. And so I thought he was going to get me more iboga so that I would go all the way in so that they could pull off their master plan of mass murder. Right? Funny now, kind of. It was horrible. Now, the thing that also that I can't quite tell you, have you ever heard of like somebody play the saw? Have you ever heard somebody play the saw? Okay. So they have the loudest, their goal is to get you into the darkest place humanly possible so you can face your fear. Okay. The music is it is penetrating you, like it's permeating your whole body. And it's the worst. It's like it's like all like nail on chalkboard, right? And if you let yourself go into the iboga, it's tolerable because it's really like in the background, like all the puking. If you're like me, eyes wide open, trying to move my extremities, it's hell, right? And so I'm like, I realize that I'm in this for like 5 hours or 6 hours, right? So I try to give myself some like allowances that like don't be irrational. I even told the guy, I'm like, hey, I think you're gonna kill me. Okay. He's like, of course you do, right?
Of course you do.
He's like, yeah. He's like, why wouldn't you?
Why would you?
He's like,
you're not helping.
He's like when I'm doing this in Africa and I'm in a pot, like underneath with a fire underneath, you I don't think I'm gonna die, right? Because he does the iboga ceremonies where they originated, right? And I'm like, yeah, but you're the guy that's gonna kill me. Like, easy for you to say, right? Like, so, and I think we might be sacrifices for Africa, right? So anyway, so I'm like, okay, dude, and I even tell him like I'm being irrational, but this is where I'm at. And so he's like, actually, this is more normal than you think.
Everybody thinks I'm gonna kill him.
Yeah,
that's fine.
So then I start saying like the birds are fucking with me because like they're chirping, but so I think it's almost sunrise, but it's not even close. Like they're just like randomly chirping in the middle. I'm like, I'm looking for anything to tell me that it's almost sunrise. Because again, you don't know if it's 3 hours or 1 minute, literally. Like you are stuck in this, like you don't know, right? And these songs are horrid, and he's like doing this like creepy dance, you know, and like he's like throwing fire around, and like it's like dark, ominous. But everybody else is like under or puking or what, you know, they're all doing. And actually when they puked, I actually felt better because like it meant that like they weren't poisoned. I was actually comfortable with them puking. It actually was like became a reassuring sound.
They're still alive
at this point. And I asked to leave. He's like, you can't leave. Right. I'm like, please let me. He's like, no, I'm responsible for your safety. You can't like, and I'm like, fuck. Like,
that's what all murderers say.
So then, yeah, my safety. So then I'm like, okay, let iboga do its thing because I'm here for several hours. And so I start negotiating with iboga. And this is when I realized iboga is me. Okay. So I start trying to beat iboga at its own game because iboga on the second night is supposed to show you your worst fear, right? And so this is going to sound disgusting, but I start manufacturing everything that I think could be my worst fear. I start like picturing me getting obliterated into smithereens, like in front of Juliet. I picture things happening to Juliet, and I'm trying to beat I'm trying to beat iboga to the punch. I'm trying to say, you think you can get me? No, I can do this. So I come up with all these things that are my biggest fear. And like when I shut my eyes, I'm like, don't show me the shit. I already know what my biggest fears are. I was like, don't show me the shit. And it would go dark and I'd open my eyes right back up. So finally I tell myself, if you're so fucking smart, then why the fuck are you in the middle of the woods with these people that are going to kill you, right? Clearly you're making bad life decisions. So you just got to fucking let go. And so then I was like, show me my worst fear. And it lines up. And I'm telling you, these visuals are the most amazing things you've ever seen. It lines up 9 fears, like drowning is one of them, like and I'm like, no, and it lines up the carousel, right? Getting ready to show me the presentation, then do like my biggest fear at the last, ta-da.
Right.
And I'm like, fuck that. I don't want any of that. I don't want the visuals. I don't want shit. Just get me my last fucking fear, my biggest fucking fear. And it shows me my biggest fear. It's so light in comparison to everything that I thought of. And then it's sunrise, and they're literally like folding towels. Like not like sharpening knives or like anything like, and I'm like, and what I realized, and iboga tells you the truth. It takes you where you have to go. And even though I didn't go on my iboga journey the way that a lot of people do, where they go under, for me, what I realized it did with me is it showed me that I manufacture all of my fears and I manufacture all of my worst thoughts. And I realized that I was awake for 5.5 hours of this journey, putting myself through hell completely unnecessarily because my worst fear was so docile, relatively speaking. Right. And that was such an amazing thing for me to realize that I've manufactured all of these things in my life. Right. And so I got the experience exactly like I was supposed to. And everybody else woke up and they were like all in like amazing places. And like, you know, everyone saw shit, everyone dealt with shit, but they were cool. Like, because here's the thing. All of this shit is in there. We just choose not to bring it up. Literally all iboga does is bring it up, and it forces you to face it. That's all it does. Right. You just have to be ready to face it. But the thing that kind of in closing on this, and then you do the same thing. Then the next 18 hours, you're in a different version of hell. But the one thing, and I shouldn't have said it because of insecurity, maybe, but I've said a couple times, like, you guys probably don't believe me, or I wouldn't have believed myself. I've softened it. Right. And that's probably a defense mechanism or whatever. But here's, and you talked about, like, you know, Western civilization, we don't look at this as normal. But here's what I've learned, and this is my truth. If you're going to be a king, or if you're going to be a government, or if you're going to be a company, you can't rule if people have their power. And so what do you do with all this shit? You call it voodoo. You call it witchcraft. You call it whatever it is that's abnormal, right?
You make it illegal.
Right? You do that because otherwise, if people actually find their power or find their strength, as a CEO, my goal was to hire as smartest people and make them build them up, right? Because that's how you get stronger. It's very sad to me and going through these experiences because I've found my true power. I'm still processing, but I am 10 times more free than I've ever been my entire life, right? And I faced my fears and I found my strengths. And I just realized, like, if you want to control people, you can't let people know that this is okay or real, because if you have people who really wake up, then you no longer have the power. There's an amazing book called The Art of Loving, and it's written in 1957. I thought it was written like 3 years ago, literally, because they talk, well, aside from like homosexual love being something that's like taboo, right? I mean, it was from 1957, right?
A little bit,
Yeah, a little bit dated, right? But it talks about how, like, you give people the perception of choice and the perception of power, right? That they're making, you know, that they're controlling, and then that's how you get people. That's how you get people to do exactly what you want them to do.
Well, it's that whole when you have the veil lifted,
yeah,
right, over, you know, or the facade is removed away from what really is, and you realize, like, well, shit, like, this isn't what I thought this whole thing was.
Yeah.
So now what is it?
Yeah.
You know, so now it's like, now I have a whole new a chapter to look forward to, and they don't want that, right?
Yeah. Not at all.
They don't want people exploring or contesting thoughts, you know, or,
yeah,
or contesting, you know, what truth is, like,
right. Yeah.
That'd be dangerous.
Yeah. Totally dangerous. And that's why, like, what people are doing, how people are using ayahuasca right now is pretty dangerous. Because it's pretty reckless.
Is it more just because, like, the recreational factor, or like how they're doing it, the setting, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah. I mean, people are going in thinking that they're doing these like deep healing exercises with these shamans, right? But what they're really getting is a really cool visuals, and they can even be great visuals, and it can even be a great experience. But it's just not as it was intended, and people are like walking into situations that they don't exactly think that they are. And it's a manipulation and commercialization of it. I hope that people are able to get like truly true Aya ceremonies. Aya was actually meant to be one-on-one, not in groups, with your shaman, and it was meant to be over several days. Like you work on things, and that's not how it works, right?
Because like, why would you want to feel somebody else's shit if you're trying to feel your own shit like that? So did they prepare you for that? I was going to ask you that. Did they like tell you like, hey, you may feel this lady's shit?
In iboga, not at all.
Like with the ayahuasca, like how do you decipher like, is this something I'm supposed to be going through for myself, or is this actually this lady's shit that I'm not supposed to even have? Because that.
Yeah, in iboga you can differentiate. It's very clearly yours. It's iboga wasn't community. Iboga wasn't. Ayahuasca was community. The best example that I can tell you is I was in Georgia once doing an Aya ceremony, and there were 9 women, maybe 11 women, and me. I was the only guy. These 9 women were hyper performers. They'd all escaped a cult. Okay. This one
in real life?
In real life.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not like what they visioned. This one woman who was in this ceremony was forced to kill 9 of her babies.
Jesus.
Okay. You want to talk about dark energy? And energy like that was, and these people like all hate men, right? They all hate, and I'm like, wait, I should not be here. Like I actually
someone give me the wrong invite for this one. I get the wrong date here, guys. Jeez.
Surprise, you're a sacrifice.
Yeah,
So
that's when you should have been terrified.
Yeah. So I did. I left that ceremony. I went into my room, which was far away from everybody, and I just hid out until it was all over because I didn't want any part of that black energy or that dark energy. It was funny. The night before I left the Boga retreat, I had an infantry. There was a woman who was in infantry, and she busts into my room at 1 a.m. She's like, "Oh my God, there's a person outside!" And I'm like, I said something. She goes, "Don't patronize me." She goes out to the deck. She starts like pacing the deck, right? And like looking. The next day at breakfast, I was like, "Hey, do you remember?" She's like, I came in your room. I was like, "Yeah."
Whoops.
I was like, "Yeah." I was like, came in the room. I said, "But here's the thing. After my night before, what I thought I was gonna die by, I was like, even if there was somebody outside, I didn't give a shit.
That was nothing compared to the night before.
I was so over it. I was done. So anyway, those are some stories. So
a fantastic and wild journey for sure that you've taken us on. It seems like you have gone on a journey of your own that is, most people could only begin to even pretend to imagine. I guess through all the changes and through everything that you've been through and the journeys, real life and ayahuasca and iboga in themselves, what is, I guess, some of the greatest things, I guess, that you've learned from those experiences? Because it seems like there's been a real trajectory of just this overview of like wisdom and knowledge and experience that you've had.
For me, I literally went through stuff until I was 17. Literally, right? Like bad stuff. After 17, I was so conditioned that I just kept on creating it for myself. And I realized now at the end of this last 2 years that I don't have to live life the way that I've been living it. I don't quite know how to do it yet. And that's what I'm working on right now. But from where I was to where I am, I'm so free. I was trapped inside my brain. I was a prisoner to my brain. And I don't feel that same way anymore. When I have irrational, like in this last week, when I've had irrational thoughts or fears, I'm just like, I've literally just told myself to shut up. And then I tell myself not to self-deprecate. But I'm like, stop it. Like, you don't need, like, this isn't real. Like, let real problems be your problems. if they come and solve them. And so for me, look, all those people that hurt me as a kid, they were all winning until this last 2 years. And they, like, everything that was fighting my healing, and like that night on ayahuasca where I was like battling ayahuasca, that was me trying to hold on to all these things that don't work for me anymore. And so now I think I actually have a chance, to where these people who are the ugliest people in my life no longer control my life. I hope other people can. What I've learned is that it doesn't matter what people have been through, right? My example is an extreme version to some, but it's nothing to others, right? It's all relative. Your problems are relative to you, right? To you, whatever it is the worst thing, right? And so we all have these things. We all have these things. We bury them, we hide them, and if you don't, like, good on you. But the more I've been around this stuff, the more I've realized how much people are hurting and how much people have covered up and, like, buried. And what I've learned is I've been, like, scared of all these things that I didn't have to be scared about this entire time. Right. So to the point of debilitation, mentally. And so, yeah, I mean, right now I have hope, right? And I didn't have hope before. I thought my hope was my daughter, that I would change things for her, right? I never thought I could change things in my lifetime. But now I actually feel like I can actually, like, I have a chance, at genuine happiness. And I think I'm doing it right with my daughter, because at 10 years old, the things that are coming out of her mouth, she's saying things at 9 and 10 and 8 that I'm saying at 44, 45, 46. Right. And she's like, and she did tell me one day, she's like, man, Dad, it would really suck to learn all this stuff when you're in your 40s. I'm like, instead of like now. I'm like, yeah, it does. Yeah, you're right. So anyway, that's my circuitous, long-winded answer.
Yeah, well, I very much appreciate the journey and you sharing it with us and what you've learned from it. And I, without a doubt, at least I know I've connected to your story in multiple ways.
Cool.
And in whatever form they might be, I think everyone can kind of connect with some of the threads there. And you just, I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us and the story. It was a blessing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I am going to go to Africa and do it in Africa with the tribe.
The iboga?
Mm-hmm. And so I've heard that you basically get buried. You get chicken blood thrown on you.
The full rites.
Yeah. And
is that where it's from originally?
that's that's the center. That's where the prime meridian meets the equator. And so it's the center of the earth. And so so I don't know all the details and facts. I won't speak to it, but how the people in Costa Rica and the people in Africa would be disgusted by what we're doing in America with all the plant medicine and the healing journeys. So they do it in their opinion what's right, but like I said, everybody has their truth. And so, but I realized that I need to go do this in Africa with the true, authentic, as it was originally intended experience. And this is not to take away from anybody else's experience. Mm-hmm. I had great recreational experiences on ayahuasca, and I wouldn't trade them. But I've gained an appreciation with iboga on paying attention to doing this stuff the right way.
Would you do ayahuasca again?
I'm contemplating it because it does give you visuals, right? And I think I could use a few visuals to help me clarify some iboga stuff that I haven't fully cleaned up. But I'm not sure.
Well, I appreciate your story and taking us on your journey. And maybe if you feel comfortable when you get back from Africa, you can tell us about that if you would like to.
Yeah. I'd like people to learn, because there are people who really, really hurt and who could really, really use this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd like people to get a crack at some of the true energy healings, leveraging Aya the way it should be, and potentially even going on the iboga journey.
Do you remember everything, or is this like I'm going to journal while I'm in this and then look at it, next week? Or is it like it's all there? You can, categories, all of it, like sitting here now, you can remember all of it. Or is it like I need to take a notebook and journal what I'm experiencing and then look at it later?
I've journaled twice. I haven't journaled the rest. You are so highly conscientious through all of this, or highly conscious, I should say, that you can remember whatever you want to remember. The one thing you have to understand is your brain is going through so much stuff, right? That like the journal doesn't hurt, because there are some things that you're going to inevitably forget.
Right.
But the one thing that does happen is, remember, when you open your eyes, you're coming back out.
Pulling yourself out.
Right. And so then you have to, and you can go back in quick. I'm not saying it takes a long time, but you may not go back. You may be on a path, and then if you change that synapse,
Find
you
yourself
may.
on a different path.
Yeah. So, but I journaled one time and I completely changed my business based on, an Aya ceremony. So on like my 5th ceremony.
It's fascinating. Well, we're pushing up on 3 hours already.
Jesus. I hope you have a good edit button.
Yeah, so I don't want to hold you too long, but I really appreciate you joining us, and I look forward to hearing anything else from you, because it's a really awesome perspective and a different perspective of life that most people don't have these days, right? They're not trying to look back and think about, what are the things in my past that I need to get right with,
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's people, myself, at least speaking towards my experience, people use religion or this or that or whatever it might be as a crutch instead of just facing themselves. And sometimes that can be the most terrifying thing, is just facing yourself.
Yeah.
So it's my hat's off to you, and I hope that you continue on a positive journey for yourself, because it looks like you've made out pretty well so far. So it's from where you are. A lot of people don't have the tenacity or the want to. So it's my hat's off to you, and I appreciate your story.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Tony. You got any parting words?
Oh, I was just kind of wondering what's next after. Well, I was going to ask you, and you said Africa, so it kind of answered my question.
Yeah, the guy tells me I should come down to Costa for 2 more before I go to Africa. He's like,
to really prepare yourself.
He's like, it's intense. Because remember, I was chicken shit like night 2, right? So that was his perspective. His perspective is, hey, dude, I hear you about Africa, but you kept your eyes open I
can say, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying now.
So, but he is such a loving, both of them are such loving people. So yeah, no, Africa, going into a pot or getting buried in chicken blood. Here we go.
This sounds terrifying. Well, like I said, I'm more than willing to have you back on if you would like to talk about it when you get back. So, but I really appreciate, again, I really appreciate your sharing your story with us.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. Remember, check out the website, chronic-curiosity.com, to join us at the forum, have some fun, interaction, pick you up a comfy t-shirt, or if you just want to support the show and donate, all that is on the website as well. Thank you. Until next time. See you.